Hey there everyone, welcome back to the channel. So in the last video we talked about top 10 React interview questions that you should know before getting into an interview. And in this video I wanted to talk about two of React's most powerful but often misunderstood performance optimization hooks, which are useMemo and useCallback. So a lot of you who are familiar with React might already know about these two hooks, and people who do not know, you must have been told that you should use them. But do you really understand what's happening under the hood? So, by the end of this video, you'll not only understand what these hooks are and when you should use them, but we'll also implement these from scratch so that you understand the ins and outs of these two hooks. So, let's get started with the fundamental. What are these hooks used for and why we need? Let's understand the core problem these hooks solve. Unnecessary re-renders and expensive recalculation. Now in React, whenever a component re-renders, everything inside the component executes again. तो अगर आपका component re-render हुआ है, the functions, states, everything inside the component re-renders again. But most of the time, this is so fast that you don't even notice. लेकिन कहीं कहीं पे this does makes a difference, and that is what we'll be talking about throughout this video. And this is where use memo and use callback comes in. So use memo lets you remember the values of expensive calculations in between renders. It only recalculates when certain dependencies change. Think of use memo like a caching mechanism for a value. So basically we are telling React that do remember this value, and whenever I tell you that you should recalculate everything again, then only you should do it. Use callback is also very much similar, but instead of remembering the values, it remembers the functions. This is particularly useful because in JavaScript, functions are objects. When your component re-renders, a new function is created even if it does the same thing as before. This actually matters when you pass a function to a child component and the child component re-renders unnecessarily because the reference of the function changed even if the function does the same thing. Now you understand why we need this. Now you can see everything is connected. If you are prop drilling the entire function from top to the fifth layer of the components, and that function has a lot of operations inside it, on every re-render, the same function is getting created and passed down to 5 of the child components, and every component is re-rendering. So this is the issue. Now what you should avoid here? Prop drilling, and you should start using use callback. We'll talk about it more in the video. Now the key difference here is simple, that use memo caches the result of a function while use callback caches the function itself. Now I want to be clear about something. These hooks are optimization tools. They are not needed everywhere, and premature optimization can make your code more complex without any real benefits. Now, this guy, who is React's one of the core developers, has said multiple times that you should measure first, then optimize. Now, when to use memo? When you have computationally expensive calculations, when you're creating objects and arrays that are being used inside the dependency array of the other hooks, when you want to prevent unnecessary re-renders in the child component that rely on object and array props. When to use callback hook? When passing functions to optimize child components that rely on reference equality. When a function is a dependency in another hook's dependency array. When a function creates a closure over values that change over time. Now let's get into the most exciting part of this video, which is implementing these hooks from scratch. Understanding how these hooks work internally can really cement your understanding of React's memoization. Let's implement a simplified version of both of these hooks. So here we have opened a simple React project. I'm creating a folder for useMemo demo. We'll create a dummy product list component, and in this component I'm trying to filter out products based on some conditions. Let me zoom in for you. So the condition is very simple. So we are sorting the products in the descending order of their price, and then a simple map of product to a dummy product item, which we are not going to build, but this is just to show you how this would look like. So this example is without using useMemo. Now let's understand the issue that this has. So every time when the component renders, you filter the items again and again based on the price. Now this particular logic should not change unless the products don't change. So if my product list is changing, then it makes sense for us to filter the items again. But if the list of the product is not changing, then why do we need to run this again and again or filter this again and again? So that is where useMemo comes in, which you will see right now. So this time we are using useMemo and doing the same thing, which is filtering out the products based on the same condition. But now we have a dependency array in which we have given products and filter item. So if the products change or the filter item change, then only we'll run this function or this function will run again. Unless that happens, it will cache the list of products and return the same products again and again. Now let's create another file for use callback demo. Here we are creating a search component. In this we'll have a search term which will be a state variable, and then we'll have a handle search function which will just pass the search term to a function that we get from the props. And then in the body we have a simple input tag on change of which we'll set the search term. And then there is a simple button. Now there could be some heavy computation happening inside the onSearch function. Now while this component re-renders, there's no need for onSearch component or handle search for that matter to re-render or to run again. So to prevent that, we add a use callback function and the search term and onSearch function goes into the dependency array. So by doing so, the reference of the function stays the same unless the dependencies change. And that is how we are able to optimize this function. Now let's move on and create our own useMemo function. Now let's understand, what does useMemo do? useMemo, what it will do is, based on certain dependencies, it will check if it needs to calculate the function passed inside of it again or not. If the dependencies do not change, then the calculation will also not change. So there is no need to call the function. But if the dependencies change, then we need to call the function again, and that is what useMemo will do for us. So if I have to create a custom useMemo, what do I need to do? I need to hold the value of the function for holding the value in between renders. So remember, the component will re-render, but we do not want our function to execute again. So whenever we want to hold a value in between renders in a particular component, we use refs in React. So let's create a ref, and this ref will have three fields: value, dependencies, and if it is initialized or not. That means if it's the first time or not. Then we'll check if the ref has been initialized and if the dependencies have changed or not from the previous render. If the dependencies changed, then we'll call the function again, update the dependencies, and set initialized as true. And then we'll return the value. So you see, we are keeping a track of the dependencies being changed or not, and based on that, we are calling the function again. Simple, right? Now let's write our use callback function. We'll create a file called useMyCallback, and we'll create a function called useMyCallback. Now this is very simple. We already have our useMyMemo function. If we use our custom useMemo function and return a callback from it, basically use callback, what it does, it caches our function, right? So instead of returning a value which useMemo does, use callback returns a function. So we can pass in a callback function. By doing so, useMyMemo will return as a callback function, and that's it. Simple, right? So use callback is just use memo where the value that is being memoized is a function. This is a very simplified version but captures the essence of how these hooks work. Now React's actual implementation might be handling a lot of cases, a lot of optimizations, but this is a very simplified version of the same, and this will help you in interviews. Maybe you will be asked to implement these from scratch or not, but this will definitely strengthen your React basics. And I bet that you will never forget these hooks again. Now wrapping up whatever we have learned till now, use memo and use callback are performance optimization hooks that prevent unnecessary recalculations and re-renders. useMemo remembers the result of a calculation between re-renders, while useCallback remembers a function reference. Under the hood, these hooks work by storing values and their dependencies, and only recalculating when those dependencies change. In real world applications, these hooks are valuable for expensive calculations like data processing or filtering, preventing unnecessary re-renders in optimized component trees. Custom hooks that involve derived state, context providers that many components depend on.